Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm so happy to be doing this. So thrilled that now the Biz Book Publishing Hub is an actual thing. You can actually tune in right now. You can listen to this one that's being recorded, but you can also go and check out all the episodes at bizbookpublishinghub.com. Here's the formal introduction. Writing a book is like running a marathon. Oh, wait, a runner can stop when they reach the finish line. Maybe the comparison is more like an Iron Man triathlon. Yeah, right? Where the athlete first swims 2.4 miles and then bikes 112 miles and then runs a marathon. Yeah, that's a better comparison for the author's journey. The Iron Man Triathlon is considered one of the world's most difficult one-day sporting events. The athlete's journey does not start that day. They spend months training for the big event, hiring trainers, buying equipment, following a strict diet regimen, and enduring all manner of torture to accomplish this impressive feat. Likewise, authors spend months, if not years, navigating a minefield of imposter syndrome, writer's block, and other torturous moments, broken up by moments of genius. To overcome this, writers need a plan, a team, and a coach to help them through all the triathlon phases: writing, publishing, and marketing. That's why I founded the Biz Book Publishing Hub, which is more than 50 experts ready to guide entrepreneurs through the complexities of their author journey. I regularly host free virtual networking events for writers and authors and host this podcast to bring you inside the minds of authors. As a book launch strategist, I know that first-time authors often struggle to see past the writing phase. Today's panel will share their experience as authors, including lessons learned and strategies that worked. Tune in to see how being part of a supportive author community can make all the difference. Before we dive into this panel, though, here is a quick word from our sponsor. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Kristy wrote 33 Ways to Not Screw Up Cybersecurity, which offers practical tips and checklists in 33 easy-to-follow chapters to help individuals and businesses protect themselves from cyber threats and avoid common security pitfalls. Sparrow wrote Ignite Your Leadership, proven tools to energize teams, fuel momentum, and accelerate results, which provides actionable strategies and insights to empower leaders to inspire their teams, drive performance, and achieve organizational success. Griere wrote Bundle Your Brilliance, turn your expertise into profitable online courses to teach experts how to package and sell their expertise effectively. Please join me in welcoming Dawn, Kathy, and Nancy. Dawn, I'm going to turn this first question over to you. I want to know a little bit about who you wrote your book for. Who did you have in mind as the ideal reader? And welcome.
Hey, Robbie, thanks for having me today. So the ideal reader for my book is looking to understand AI and cyber risks through relatable scenarios and tips, checklists, and things that simplify the complex issues. That's sort of a general scenario, but I wrote the book during the pandemic, and it was a unique time to launch a book and to launch a business. And the book was really something that came from my heart because we had remote work. It was new. We had virtual conferencing. All of this was new. And the bad guys were taking advantage of our new remote work scenario. And we had a lot of human error happening and a lot of cyber attacks. And I thought, I've got the time, I've got the knowledge, so I'm going to write something on cybersecurity awareness for the average person to understand, the business leader, their teams. It really could apply to anyone. But the idea was to get people more cyber secure, particularly during that time.
I really appreciate that kind of book because we all really were leaving ourselves open, not knowing it. Kathy, what about you? Who did you have in mind as the ideal reader for your book?
So my belief is everybody's a leader, right? And so this book is for those people who acknowledge that they're leaders and want to better their skills at leading. And it first starts with self-leadership and then goes into organizational leadership. And then those who may be just getting into leadership and leaderships in our families too, and communities. So it doesn't even have to be on a corporate level, although I was joined with 10 of my colleagues from Jack Canfield's advanced trainings. And so most of us were either in corporate or working with corporate entities. So that's it. No, kind of a little package there.
I appreciate that. Nancy, how about you? Who do you have in mind?
Well, like Dawn, I wrote my book during the pandemic, and one of my observations was that a lot of people panicked and started pushing content online in the form of courses. And sadly, there's a lot of, I'm going to be kind here, a lot of mediocre content was created that really didn't truly reflect how brilliant people are. So I targeted a combination of authors, speakers, coaches, and consultants that had some form of intellectual property that could help people to advance in some way, and wanted them to be able to see, hey, if you really step back and you think about how to design your programs, you'll end up with something that's much more effective, which will elevate your brand instead of detract from it.
Nancy, you're saying all this, and I'm cringing a little because I remember very early in the pandemic, everybody and their mother, quite literally, came out with virtual summits, online courses, because we all were trying to be helpful and be relevant and stay visible and put ourselves out there. And the rush was just, overwhelming, and the quality kind of dipped a little bit for some people. And it was interesting because there was some really high quality stuff out there as well, which showed you what was possible. Nancy, when you were first writing this book, not maybe today, but when you were first writing this book, what were the success metrics that you were keeping track of so you knew this book is doing well? Was there something in particular you were like, oh, I want to know that it does this or this happens? What was back then your goal?
So my goal at that point in time was for the people to be able to actually do something different, to take a different action. And I would get feedback when I was out and about this process is easy to follow. I feel like I can do this. So much of the early on feedback was very much anecdotal. It would, people saying nice things. But what I kept hearing over and over again was, I see it's possible. I think I can do this. Where before people would be just overwhelmed by the whole process of doing it. And of course, as you said, everybody's pushing content out there. So it was like, oh, I got, me too. I gotta be part of the club.
Did you have in mind like reviews or sales or hitting number one or booking a certain number of gigs? Like, was there anything like that in the back of your mind?
Yes. So certainly I wanted to hit number one status in some category on my first day out, which I was able to do, to get to that number one status so that I could carry the, best-selling, international bestseller. I wanted to get to that point. And then I started looking at every time I went and I spoke and I had books for sale, what was the percentage of people that bought books in the audience? And I wanted to get to at least 25%, but I was consistently getting 50% or more, which then was an indicator that what I was saying and what I was delivering was of value. Then, life intervened, and I'm at a point now where I'm looking at, well, what do I do to ramp it up? Because you have all that excitement, and when you first get it out there, you're like, oh, I got it done, I made it, I played the bestseller game and I won. And okay, now so now really several months. Oh, gosh,
we'll get some ideas for you on this call, I bet. Hey, Dawn, I'm going to come to you with the same question about your early on metrics that were important to you that would help you know that the book was doing well, the book was going to be a success. I know that you worked with a hybrid publisher. They publish a lot of books with the same sort of format. Maybe you got some guidance from them about what to aim for. What sort of was important to you early on?
Well, the number one word for me was awareness. So get people aware of the risks. And that was through, again, the book and then speaking. And my world stayed virtual for a long time. I didn't have a chance to go to do an audience and have 50 books there. That this was, Zoom or sometimes Teams. But the thing that helped me was Book Award Pro. I did receive an award for a business leadership, industry expertise, something like that from the Book Fest. So I was able to then say award-winning book. Also, when the book first came out, I miscalculated and I didn't really make use of number one bestseller online safety or number one new release in viruses and malware, because I was actually using the book to leverage, and I started speaking. And so I have to say my metrics tracking was probably not what it should be, and it would be better in a second book. But it was really almost like riding the crest of a wave, is how I described it. But the other thing that happened was I did do, the free Booksy campaign. I sold there. I did promos for the free and 99 cents, sort of like your campaign. And so what I was able to do is leverage the book and to get speaking, and then in the speaking, leverage the book. So that was sort of my metric. It wasn't anything, scientific or analytic at that point.
It usually isn't, which is why I partly want to reveal this. Kathy, I don't know that you're going to have anything revelatory about this, because really, I think when we're first new to writing, we don't really know what we don't know. So Kathy, how were you approaching these early stages of the book?
So this book, Ignite Your Leadership's in the 3rd edition. So the very first edition came out, I think it was 2016 or 17. And so we had a summit with a lot of big names, interviewed Jack Canfield and several other people. So we hit international bestseller, and that was really good. We then had a 2nd edition a couple years later. The publisher that we originally went with sold, and so we had a chance to revamp. But this most recent edition has been out about a year, but we did your campaign, Kindle campaign, and that boosted it, and it made it more relevant. So I've tracked those numbers. We did make international bestseller first time around. We went into the top 10 again this last round, and that's where where it stops as far as and I do notice our Facebook page is getting more and more hits. So
yeah,
to me that shows interest.
So I feel like I'm about to burst some bubbles here, so hold on to your hats if you're listening. I'm really curious because this whole #1 international bestseller thing, we all know that people can hit #1 in US and #1 in Canada in just one category each, and like they go and they reprint their cover to say international bestselling author. And the thing that I want to say about that is it actually shouts from the rooftops that this book was not published by a publisher, because no publisher would do that. Particularly if they would if it was New York Times bestseller, they would if it was a reputable award, but they wouldn't republish the cover if it just hit #1 Amazon bestseller with a little logo. So it's an unfortunate thing that we're still in a world where self-published books, indie authors are a little discriminated against, I would say, because the quality varies. So it's hard when you have a really good book. You really still have to make the effort to stand out. And I focus a lot on reviews, and we'll get to reviews in a moment. But I hit #1 in 18 categories for my last book across 3 countries. I've hit #1 collectively across 3 books 30 times across 4 countries. And I say that whole sentence. I never say international bestselling author because, well, it doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? Like, because it could just mean, it could mean anything, which means it means nothing. And so if you have stats where you've hit #1 in a number of places, I would spell that whole thing out somewhere on your website, not just go for the #1 international bestseller, because those in the know are like, huh, yeah, great. And it's, you want to back it up. And this is partly because I've been part of the National Speakers Association for a decade. And this is one of those early lessons that I got amongst that group. But for me, I think of it as a byproduct of a good launch is that you hit #1 in at least one category. That means you've chosen your categories well. And it's hard because sometimes categories are just really competitive and you will never get that #1 spot because it's some famous book that, is never going to get out of that #1 spot. But hopefully you have other categories you can choose. And the reason you're going to #1 is because you've got people buying your book. So I've really focused on the launch piece. I'm curious now, as your experience with these books has evolved, I'm going to come back to Nancy for this one. What's changed about what you think of as success now? It sounds like you've had some luck, with the book and getting some speaking gigs and getting people to buy the book. That's fantastic. You probably didn't know that when you were starting out. So you want more of that. 50% of the audience buying your book is a great testament to how relevant the book is to the audience you're in front of. But is there anything now you start thinking of as being more of a success metric that you wouldn't have thought of before getting to this point in the process?
I will say that when I got started, the only thing I had my eye on was the launch and the bestseller day. And then, of course, the speaking gigs and things evolve from that. Now, what I think about is coming up with a way that there's a more consistent sales cycle, that the books are, that it's not just here and there, and when I participate in an event like the one that you hosted, where sales then ramp up. But what can I do so that it's, I don't even know what to pick for a daily number or weekly number or whatever that might be, but some kind of I want to get to a certain number of sales. So then what do I have to do in order to achieve a more consistent revenue stream? At 99 cents.
Right. It's not going to, yeah. I mean, what you all participated in was the Kindle cross promotion campaign that we did around Amazon Prime Day. I do it again later in the year around Black Friday. So it's twice a year that we organize this. And we're business authors like yourself. We all lower our Kindle book price to 99 cents. What's been fun is there are some authors in the program who have books that are quite a few years old and still relevant, still evergreen. And then there are people who just came out with a book within a year, sometimes within a month. And so we get to boost all of these books and kind of get back into talking about these books from a long time ago. It's not the way, if the book's about getting in front of the right buyer, it's helpful because you never know where your next speaking opportunity is going to come from. But I like your idea of consistency with sales. Does anyone here have a guess to how many books most books sell? Like how many books an author can sell, like in that first year? Mm-hmm. So I've asked now a bunch of people in the publishing industry, and like, I don't know who's got what data point, but I hear 100 a lot. So if you sold more than 100 books in that first year, you're doing really well. The goal is 10,000 in the first year, but that is far and away the top percentage of people whose books are going to hit that. So most people, the average is hitting 100. So if you're over 100, you're doing really well. So it's really hard to imagine, because I think when we first go to publish a book, we don't have that in mind. Dawn, what about you? What has changed about the way you define success these days compared to maybe where you were?
Completely. So positioning 90%, I never realized that. So I think that my journey has been to become a marketer, which I never really envisioned. And, I thought about relaunching my book, and actually I'm relaunching my marketing, because just to keep it brief, cybersecurity is more important now because of AI risks. And so in a way, the situational thing in the market is bolstering. And so my idea would be to get to the live conferences and sell in bulk, or put it in the package for each attendee or what have you, because I am a speaker and podcast guest person, writer, but I really still want to keep my finger on the pulse of training, especially AI and cyber risk. So I feel like the book is the sales. I have over 1,000 sales. I thought that was a low number, but the idea is, for me, leveraging the book to do the speaking, to do what my heart is calling me to do, which is train people to be more secure. So for me, it's not so much the book sale, but what the book will do for me in the other areas.
Anyone who's thinking about writing a book, who's listening to this, probably can't envision that future that you're describing, but it's possible once you have that book. Both you and Nancy have been talking about speaking in front of a group of people, and then they're buying your book. Either the company is buying it on your behalf, or they're telling the audience about it. So that's great. Kathy, what about you? What's shifted for you about how you think about your book?
Well, I think of it more as a lead gen, bring awareness not only to my writing, but also to my colleagues writing or work as well. So because I'm in the world of writing and publishing as a consultant, this is, testimony to what I've done. And the fact that Jack, had a good big name do our forward, that's pretty, adds more credibility there too. So what I've noticed is that I do get more invitations to speak. I get people, asking about helping them with their books on leadership or other, lots of other topics, but mostly in the nonfiction world.
I think that having that credibility factor with Jack Canfield is great. I mean, it separates you out from a lot of other people who maybe don't have any connections. Were you like, how did you approach that? Were you found, I know he does a lot of book programs. Did you hear about one of his book programs? You sort of got involved. Like, how did you get connected to him, or did you already know him through other pieces?
I started training with Jack in 2010.
Wow. Okay.
And I went through several of his programs, including Train the Trainer program, which is where I met my colleagues, and they approached me, because I grew up in publishing, the traditional, and then moved into the more hybrid and whatnot. So we had that, and I will tell you that he's very particular, so it had to be a darn good book. He just won't put his name on anything. So yeah, and it was it's great to have his support,
Kathy, that piece you just said about being a good book, I feel like we got to mention that. Anything you do with your book has to start with the fact that it's a darn good book. It's like pointless, all the marketing in the world. I actually was just talking to a prospect. He's got it's actually a fiction series that he was asking about how to bring it all together. He's got book 4 out of 5 he's working on. Well, book 1 has a 1-star rating, talking about how this book needs an editor. And so I said, so before we do marketing, do you want to maybe like put this through another editor? And he says, I've been thinking about it. I keep not getting to it. I'm like, don't pay anyone to send people to this book series if you can't feel really good about the quality of the book that you're sending them to. What's the point? Your closest friends aren't the ones who are going to leave bad reviews. The more people who know about your book means it's going to be people who don't know you, and they're going to be very honest. People seem more motivated to write bad reviews than good ones. So you really have to have a good book. So I'm glad that came up in that conversation. And speaking of reviews, this is my happy place. I know it's not everybody's happy place. I love reviews. They are social proof on the book sales page that's helping a prospective reader decide whether to buy this book. And given how much is out there that's not great quality, and there's now the influx of AI generated it used to be write a book in a weekend. Now there's write a book in an hour. It's like, okay, back to it being a darn good book. So I'm going to come back to you, Kathy. I noticed you don't have reviews. Is that because it wasn't part of the process that you were doing? Are the reviews in earlier editions? Like, this is the 3rd version of this book. So I imagine you don't keep relaunching in the same way. For anyone who's thinking of doing a 2nd or 3rd edition, I'm curious how you approach the launch of the newer version.
Actually, it was more of a sleeper launch. We put it up there. We did some socials. It's on my showcase page. I'm not sure I would do a 3rd edition again. I think, there has to be a lot of energy behind it. And I think we didn't have that.
It's hard. Yeah, you definitely have to be enthusiastic about the same content for a very long time. It's the reason I never got a doctorate. I couldn't imagine being that enthusiastic about one topic for that many years. Yeah. That's hard to do.
And I would bet that I forgot to pull the reviews on the previous editions. My bad.
Yeah. You can always reach out to them even now and invite them to comment on the future one. So by the way, if you happen to have background noise, you can hit the mute button when it's not your turn to speak, and then we can make sure you unmute yourself. So I'm going to come over to Dawn. Dawn, you had a really good turnout, and I say this because you got 18 reviews and 23 total ratings. For those who are following along from home, ratings are the stars, which you don't have to write a review to leave a rating on Amazon. So people, it's a lot easier to get people to do stars than it does writing reviews. But 18 reviews is close to 20, and getting over 20 is sort of the baseline in my mind, because it shows you put real effort in. Because most people, they hit publish, maybe they get 3 reviews, like nothing happens. So how did you approach the review process? Was this organic reviews?
I did check it today. It shows 23 reviews, 4.5 stars. So
so what I'm sharing is 18 are actually the written kind, 23 ratings.
Oh, yes. Well, I have to tell the heartbreaking story, because my book was out about, 2 months, and a couple of people I knew gave me 5 stars. And then I had the knife in the heart, where somebody left a 1 star with no comment. And a couple people said, oh, that's sabotage because cybersecurity is so popular. But it took me like a couple days to really register that somebody would do that. Like, if it's that bad, can you tell me why? But you have to be thick-skinned and carry on. And I got better for a while at requesting reviews. It helps the market, it helps people. And now, like in my LinkedIn newsletters and things, I'm focusing more on, get in touch with me for speaking and for help and training. And I have moved away somewhat for the review requests, but every now and again, I will write something that addresses my book. Like I did a post, The Bear in the Book, and I've got my book with a little bear that I did on, I think it was mock-up or something, and a little bear is holding. And I made a little joke about the bear in the book with the play on The Bear, the show in Chicago. And from that, I actually bumped up a little bit in sales. So I do think if you write something about your book periodically and put in that pitch for the review, it does work.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because we're all part of this Kindle cross promotion campaign where you're lowering your book price for like 2 weeks because there's so many people that I can't have you do it all last minute. That would be a great time to go back and start asking people again. But Nancy, I imagine you also got a lot of feedback from the book because it's so well received when you're speaking and people are coming up to you to tell you how much they like it. Are you able to then ask them to go post more reviews? Is that how you're getting some of them? Or so what's that process been like for you? Go ahead and unmute. You muted in your end, so I can't unmute you. There we go. Oh, whoop. We try that again. There we go. Oh, I'm not gonna hold it. Oh, here we go. Fantastic, Nancy.
Like I've never done this before, right? I do try to remember to ask people to write a review, which is great. And one of the things that happened along the way is I was invited to people that they decided to do a book study around my book. It was the NSA chapter in Philadelphia. They were doing a book study and they said, would you come to one of our meetings? Of course I will, right? And that was just a interesting thing I was like, oh, I felt so honored that they chose my book to do that. And that was a great opportunity then to ask for reviews at that moment. But you've got to always remember to keep asking.
That happens to be my chapter of the National Speakers Association. I moved here 3 years ago. I got involved in the last year and a half, and I'm now on the board. So shout out to NSA Philly. Fantastic to hear that they brought your book in. You should see if you can repeat that with other NSA chapters. It's a great idea. Lois Kramer's book is in all the chapters. There are a whole bunch of them talking about her content. So definitely can do that. I think it's really hard to get people to write a review and put it on Amazon. And with that context, I'll tell you that I have over 200 reviews for each of my books. My last one hit 250 just a couple days ago. And I was so grateful because it took 6 months to get from 249 to 250 on the written reviews. And I was just waiting. I was just waiting for that one more. My process is I get likely prospects and referral partners on the launch team. So not just friends and family and fellow authors, as much as they will probably, maybe, I don't know, might help out. They don't have budgets, so there's really no pipeline if I go that route. So I work really hard to get the right people in the fold, and then I guide them through writing the review, giving them some prompts to answer so they can write 2 or 3 sentences, and I collect the reviews in advance before the book's published. And when the book comes out, I then guide them through publishing it. So one thing you might want to do is actually figure out what the steps are for publishing review. So when someone sends you a nice note via email, you could say, oh, fantastic. Here, would you mind following these steps to copy this and put it into Amazon? Because people really don't do that a lot. So they probably are a little like stumped. It becomes a to-do item that it never gets to done. So I mean, for reviews, I think could be useful in so many ways because you can then use them also. Hey, can you post this on Goodreads or the LinkedIn recommendation? Or may I post it on my website or a social graphic? So once it's written, it can be useful in so many other different avenues. I want to ask though, aside from reviews, what was the big challenge? Kathy, I'm going to bring this question over to you. Besides the, the process of reviews and the fact that you did the second and then third edition, what is something that feels like it was hard for you? And you go ahead and unmute yourself before you jump back in.
Thank you. Hard for me in what way?
Writing the book. Was it about getting it published initially? Was it decision to even do another edition? Like what was sort of the challenge, and where do you bring a team members in?
That's really, it was interesting for me. It was being a leader of the project. Since it was 10 people, I'd be really nice about, deadlines slipping, and took us a lot longer to get the book done than it needed to. And it was my leadership lesson. So the second and third ones, I was a little tougher. And now I help people with their anthologies, and, there's
You have so many lessons learned. You turned it
I
into a
have
business.
lessons. Well, I'd been doing this, writing coaching for quite a while and publishing consulting for years. So it was just, these were my friends, and life came up, and I can't get to it. I'm like, okay. And it kept push. And that was difficult. I think the other thing is to have really clear, have a contract. If you're doing a multi-author book, have a contract so that this is what's, expected, including participating in social and the launch, right? This is what you need to do. So, it was a good training ground.
I really appreciate that, because I've met with authors who they want to write a book, but they've already done a chapter in an anthology, in a collaborative book. And I asked them, well, what did you do with that book? How did that book end up benefiting your business? And most of them kind of shrug at it, like, I don't know. And it's like so odd, because even if the rest of the authors don't do a lot, you still can. And if that content stays relevant, you can keep talking about it. So, it's interesting that a lot of times people don't realize that publishing is usually the goal of the publisher. That's like their main job. But beyond that, coming up with a plan, and like you said, having contracts in place for what people's involvement will be. I really appreciate that. Dawn, I'm going to come over to you with the same question. What, other than reviews, has been the biggest challenge for you about getting the ideas out of your head, finding the right team to work with? Because I don't know how you found the hybrid publisher that you worked with. What was sort of the big challenge for you?
Well, I put it in the context of what would I advise somebody writing a book, and my idea is timing is crucial. You get one shot at publication date, so gear up for it and make a splash. I did not. The pre-launch part of my experience was just not anything substantial, and that's my biggest lesson and my miscalculation. The pre-readers, the team. It was a hot topic, mastermind group, early marketing, write and speak about it pre-launch. And then something I learned that I didn't know you could do, and this is kind of a tip, and you guys probably all know this, you can actually submit for book awards before the book comes out. And so when the book comes out, I understand you could get like a seal that there's already, whatever award on the cover. And, there's a lot of things you can do pre. And that's what I would change. That was my lesson learned. And if I was advising someone, I would say, ramp up and make sure you're ready. Have that pre-launch be stellar. Because once it's out, that's it. It's kind of like, that's the headline of the day. And then tomorrow, here's the next headline. So.
Well, it's kind of like what Nancy was saying about ongoing marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that the book doesn't just have that spike one time. Something right. I like to point out to authors is that the publication date and your launch date, in my estimation, not the same day. So all this pressure for an author to get it right on that first day doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because there's no sales, there's no reviews. So we're not going to tell the world about it. We should only tell our launch team. And then we use 2 or 3 weeks to get reviews and hit number 1 and all these other things that we can do to make the book a success. And then we have our announcement, where our big party or whatever it might be. Because I don't know why we would send PR to a book that hasn't had that track record. Nancy, go ahead and unmute. I'd love to hear your thoughts about challenges of writing a book. I mean, it was it was a hot thing to do in the middle of the pandemic. I accidentally wrote 2, which I didn't realize until someone introducing me for a speaking thing said, and he wrote 2 books during the pandemic. And I went, what? Like, I hadn't thought of it that way. But Nancy, what was that challenge for you?
The biggest challenge was to dedicate time consistently to be at my desk and writing. And I had to keep kind of just, block the time on your calendar and get in there and do it. So one of the things that I did along the way, I worked with Kathy Fayek to help me get the book written, is I went to see her in Florida, and I spent 2 or 3 days with her, and all I did was work on the book and write. And then that gave me the bulk of the content that I needed. So after that, it got easier because then I just had to go back and review it and go, okay, is there anything that's missing? Did I overdo anything here? So that I could then just get it streamlined. It's a very process oriented book. So that made it easy because I knew these are the phases and I got to address everything in each phase. But the challenge for me was, the focus and discipline to get it done.
Kathy Fack is one of the founding hub partners of Biz Book Publishing Hub. So if you go to bizbookpublishinghub.com, you'll find her listed there. And she offers these retreats and also groups with writing prompts. It's great stuff that she does.
She's
and
terrific.
I think that, a lot of this is about finding the right way to help you approach writing. One of the things I learned from my first book was that I thought that I could just spend, 5 or 6 hours once every 2 or 3 weeks dig in. It would take me about 90 minutes to get my head back around the content. It was a lot of time wasted. And I learned that I had to touch the file every day for a minimum of 15 minutes. It might just be reading it. It might be editing. It might be adding some notes. It might be writing. But I had to be in the file on a regular basis, sometimes obviously for much longer than 15 minutes. But I just would lose the thread. I would just find it really hard to pick up the piece again. And I didn't know that that would be the case. And I don't identify as a writer. So I think people who like to write and have the discipline to write might feel differently about that part of the process. I'm going to dive now into a section around how these books that you're writing are helping your business goals and how clear that is. Dawn, I'm going to come to you for this one. You had a real plan to turn this into a business. You saw the problem. You knew people needed help. This was going to be your credibility. How did you tile that together? Are there lead magnets in the book to help attract people to your email list and get them some extra content? Was there an offer in the book or mentioning of some programs you're doing or that you spoke? So how tightly did you feel like it all fit together, or did you not have the plan in place yet?
Oh, no, it fit together. It fit together because I moved to Florida for an executive position and in cyber insurance, and it just wasn't happening during the pandemic. So talk about a major reinvention, book in one hand, the Cyber Dawn business in the other. So it was meant to be unified. And of course, the business itself, how much did the book help? It helped a lot to get people to, accept having training. Was it as lucrative as an executive position? No, but I had the time to do it, the interest to do it. It actually helped me catapult my entrepreneurial spirit to actually try that. And then, I stepped back from cyber insurance at that point. And now what comes along is AI, and that kind of regenerated a spark in me to again stick with cybersecurity, but in a slightly new niche. And again, same thing. Use the book to drive the business, and the business is paid talking, paid training. There's a lot of PSAs we do, and we go give freebies at associations and things. But I feel this go round, I'm much more driven, to make it more lucrative.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate the intentionality you had behind that. Nancy, coming back to you, how did you sort of tie these pieces together? Clearly, there was a need in the pandemic for someone to please be the adult in the room telling us how to do this well. How did you tie that back to the services that you provide?
Well, when I work with people as a coach in a done with you type of an offer, then I give them a copy of the book. So I point them to different sections of the book to help them through the process. So what that's done is that saved me quite a bit of time because I'm not as much in teaching mode as I am in coaching and consulting mode. And I find it very helpful for my clients because they've got something to refer to and something to hang on to. They've got, okay, I'm going to use this checklist, this worksheet. They can read, we'll talk about it. They can then read it and then go forth and do it. So it just makes it easier for them, which then, they feel successful and they feel encouraged to keep going.
So Nancy, if I'm reading your book and I'm like, oh, I really want to do this, but I really need to do it well. How clear is it, the path to you from that point, from someone who's reading your book?
The path to me?
Yeah.
Well, there's different points about there's subtle drops around how I can help. So there's a lot of examples in there. So they'll see how I help somebody else. So that should, plant the seed to come to me for work. And then there's different points where I'll say, if you need more support, reach out. And now what I did, the book is now an online course as well. So, and so those two things go together. And I use the online course now in the same way. So people can either choose the online course, they can choose the book, or they, both, depending on kind of what they want.
Those breadcrumbs, I love those little breadcrumbs where it's like you do this also on stage where you say things like in my book or when I was working with a client, right?
Mm-hmm.
When
Right.
I spoke at such and such, right? It makes people go, oh, right. They do these other things. And I guess the book really lets you to do that as well. I'm in the opposite side of this, Nancy. I created an online program to go with my coaching around book launching so that my coaching clients had a resource to follow, which has been wonderful. They're coming to that first call ready to go. And now I've been told to write a fourth book. And I've accepted this challenge. So I'm now going to take the content from the program and develop it into a quick guide book as like a lead gen. Like,
Yeah.
courses, obviously the program's more money, but here's something if you really want to just kind of do it on your own. Kathy, I'm going to come over to you to ask about that same question. How tightly does the book sort of fit with the business? If I'm reading the book, do I have a clear path to come find your services?
Well, in my bio, I talk about being a writing coach. And so this book in particular probably isn't that clear path. Interestingly, since doing our promotion in July, I don't have a book on writing. I help people with writing. So I actually started that. So perhaps, well, not November, but maybe next July, I'll have that book ready to go. And then that will be the clear path because it really will.
Yeah.
It's that will describe my process, how I differ from other writing coaches and whatnot. So, Ignite Your Leadership is in my portfolio. So it's a beautiful book. It's, great, splashy color. Oops, can't do that. And then it's just, I've worked with multiple authors, right?
That's right. I mean, even for you, the act of writing that and being part of that community of authors is part of the journey of helping you propel your business forward. Well, in a moment, I'm going to be coming over to you, Kathy, again, to ask you, what advice would you give someone who's writing a book to help them grow their business? But first, a quick word from our sponsor. All right, Nancy. Oh, sorry, Kathy. I said, I'm going to go into Kathy. Kathy, what is the advice that you would give someone who was thinking about writing a book to help them grow their business?
Well, one, it's a great way to add credibility. So don't wait. I think it really does help people kind of get a peek behind the curtain of who you are, and it's an easier way in the door than going and spending $100 or whatever on a webinar or one day program. And I think we have wisdom that can be shared, and if they don't have time to sit down and write and do the process, get a ghostwriter to help, because it really does elevate everyone's a person's credibility once they become an author. So
definitely a worthwhile investment in money and time.
Absolutely.
In fact, if you go to the bizbookpublishinghub.com and you click on the writing tab, the first section is ghostwriters, because the first question someone needs to think about is, do they have time to write this themselves, or do they want to work with someone? So Nancy, the question again is, what advice would you give someone who's writing a book to help them grow their business?
To be real intentional about who your market is, so that you're writing to the people that you want to work with. I think that's the first thing, is to think about who's the audience, who is it that you want to help, so that it's very clear to the reader that, hey, that's me, that's what I need. I think that's the first step.
It's so important. When I was first writing my first book, I knew it was going to be a book about networking. It's such a broad topic. It could be so many kinds of people. And I ended up focusing on networking at conferences and events because that's at least a subset. So you have to really understand your market. It's a really good point. Dawn, I'm going to bring this question over to you. What's the advice you would give someone writing a book to help them grow a business?
I agree with what Nancy said in the sense that you really have to pinpoint your target audience. There has to be a purpose to it. The thing we sometimes forget is, I like this subject. I want to write about it. I think it's great. And then you find out, one of the gurus I followed, I won't mention him now, but he always said, if you don't have a customer willing to pay the price for your service, you don't have a business. And it's the same thing with a book. If you don't have an audience who's going to pay $9.99 for the Kindle version or whatever it might be, then really, what's your point? So you're writing it for others, and it's not about you, it's for them. And if you get in that mindset, then everything you're doing this is my business mindset. It's for them. It's for my target audience. So that's what I would say to another author or mentee.
I was thinking about how that relates back also to the kind of work that Nancy does with people creating online programs and courses. It's like I've seen people spend lots of time building things out, and then they bring it to the market, and the market's like, "Who are you? What is this? I don't need this." And I call it expert syndrome, where we are able to diagnose what other people need, but that person has no idea, and so we're not selling it to them because they're not going to buy it. They have no idea. They're looking for like a Band-Aid solution. And we're like, hey, it's a $2,000 course. And they're like, no, thank you. So I think similarly, don't spend all that energy writing a book that doesn't have an audience and doesn't solve a need that they have, particularly in the world of nonfiction business that we're creating. So Dawn, I'm going to come back to you to ask you, how can listeners find you and follow your work?
So I'm pretty much on LinkedIn daily. You can find me there. And then thecyberdawn.com is my website. And I do regular writing, and you can find me through the website and through LinkedIn. Those are my two primary avenues.
That's great. We're going to put all these links in the show notes at bizbookpublishinghub.com. I also have links to your LinkedIn and your YouTube. Kathy, what about you? Where can people find you and follow your work? And go ahead and unmute.
Like, I haven't done this before, right? So I'm also on LinkedIn, and my website is a writable.life.com. And writable is spelled WRITABLE.
It's tough when you have a website that most people don't know how to spell correctly.
I know, but it just,
you tell people.
Just works.
Well, we'll have it spelled out for you in the show notes. Nancy, how can people find you and follow your work?
I think we have a theme here. I'm on LinkedIn, and my website is nancygriere.com, and you'll be able to find the spelling in the show notes.
Fantastic. In fact, we also going to have links to your book, to all your social sites, etc. Biz Book Publishing Hub is also where you're going to find out about the free virtual networking events that I host 6 times a year for writers and authors to connect with each other and with our hub partners, as well as these show notes and more than 50 experts who are there to help guide entrepreneurs through the author journey to successful author and helping them grow their business, every phase from writing, editing, publishing to marketing. So don't be out there as the athlete all by yourself on the course. Come and get the support you need. We're here to support you. And this panel has shared all their secrets. Thank you so much for being here, folks. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.